In this video, we'll be creating dreadlocks with Fabric and Blender geometry node in general. So this is the final result we'll be trying to get. We'll be ending up with the cleaner version, but I wanted to kind of show the possibilities with this particular workflow where you can get a more rougher looking one and a more cleaner looking one. For my reference, I use this particular hairstyle to kind of reference to make sure it's closer to reality, and then you can kind of have your own artistic interpretation from that. So let's go into the scene and see how that was set up. Okay, so this is the scene, and we can select each of the curves. By the way, I'm using the add-on Fabric, and it makes working with geometry node quite easy. I have a lot of video kind of showing all the features and what's possible with it, but with this tutorial we'll just be focusing on kind of creating the dreadlocks. It will also probably give you some insights on how you can work with it. Let's turn off the dreads and we can see how the base afro hair is looking. As you can see, it's basically simple hair if we turn off all the modifier of the right hair. Okay, so if we turn this off, you can see this is the base groom. Basically, you can go into the sculpt mode, and I kind of groomed this manually. Here was kind of laid down, and then the top had some hair kind of randomly pushed up. This is to give an illusion of growth of the dread, just to make everything feel more unified, even though they are two different hair system. So once I have the base guide curve, I add a simple coily noise, simple coiliness, and then I add noise to break off the coiliness and kind of push it out to feel more afro-like. Then the clump is to create clumps of hair, like depending if you want it to be more full without like very freshly brushed or combed hair, then you probably want to reduce the effect of the clump or don't have any clump at all, and that's how you kind of work with that. But yeah, you can do it or without it. You can also, then I use stream to create the fade. If you watched the previous video, I showed how you can set this up yourself to get very nice transition from the 0 hair to like 0.5, then it transitions nicely. We'll be doing in this tutorial overall. Just a little update about the add-on. So all the presets I use for this tutorial has been added to the main Fabric as default presets. So you have rough dreadlock, clean dreadlocks. The video which I showed you regarding the rough dreadlocks setup and preset has been added to Fabric as default, so you can update your Fabric and you have access to them. Okay, so let's look, before we jump into the tutorial, we can see how the main dreads are kind of set up. Turn this off for now. So the main dreadlocks are quite simple actually. So if we turn all of this off and we turn off the children, this is just basically what I groomed, and then I add children to give it some volume, which is what you use to control the radius of the dreads. And then I added like a coiliness to give it more of that dread look. Yeah, I use crazy resolution so that we can really get the coiliness going throughout the entire length. And in render view, you get even more coiliness. Then I added noise to kind of break it down a little bit. And finally added the fray. Fray effect modifier to kind of add some more randomness, some hairs sticking out, as you can see right here. So it doesn't look completely just mathematical. Okay, so that's basically how it was set up. I think unintentionally I kind of did a very quick tutorial for you guys. But if you want to kind of stay for the main tutorial where I will show every single step, that's what we'll be doing here. So let's get started. So this is our base scene with our eyelash groom and the eyebrows. So we want to start by creating the main base hair. So to do that, we'll just click on plus to create a new hair. So like, it's just adding new hair curve, so it's doing nothing complex. So we can go ahead and call this hair, and we generate. So at this point, you want to create a new texture. And once you create a new texture, you can go into texture paint and paint it up. So I already have one. If I can get hair, but I didn't delete it. It seems like we'll have to paint a new one. I probably didn't save out the texture. So I will set the resolution to 2. Keep forgetting this these days. 224 times 2. Okay, 2K texture, and then we can call this hair, or just afro hair. Okay, so for the color, we set it to white and hit OK. So everything disappears. You can always invert it if you want to paint it the other way around. So if you click on this brush icon, it takes you right into texture paint mode, where it has set up all your mask texture for you, and all you just need to do is go in and start working. So set the color to black, strength to 1, and I will use a more constant fall off. I will use symmetry tool to make sure we kind of we don't do twice the job. You can go to the tools, and if I remember this clearly, options, you can turn off occlude and back faces to paint through the mesh like this. So even without symmetry, for example, I can paint this and it paints through the mesh. So it comes in handy sometimes when you just don't want to move around so much. So be aware, if you have this turned on, it might paint in certain areas you don't want. So use it when needed, and remember to turn it off. So I have mine in the quick favorite, so I can turn it on and turn it off whenever I need to. So we're just painting in a nice mask. Turn it off at the wrong time. Anyways. Okay, so we're good, and we can go ahead and save all images. So you can come here, save all images. What this does, it saves it in the blend files. So when you're ready to, you don't have to bother about, at least for now, going into the image editor and exporting the image. Once you're done, you can come here. Let's say we switch this to image editor and get the afro hair, and we can save as. So it's gonna export it to your local locations basically. Okay, so for the setting up, let's play with the hair radius. I'm going to go 0.0001. Just reduce the hair radius, and then for the length we'll use 0.05. So depending on what you're going for, this is kind of falls on your project, or at least your reference specs. And then for the density, I'm going to increase it to 300. We can still use it so that we don't use so much unnecessary children. And it looks good. We can go ahead and apply this. So note, you can always change the color of your hair through this color icon here. So we can click on this brush, and it takes us right into sculpt mode. So you don't have, if you can select the object, just go straight right into the sculpt mode, which is pretty cool. Okay, so I usually use this window header show to settings, so you can easily access certain tools, and I'm going to select comb and use projected for now. So what we want to do is to just brush this, and importantly, I'm going to use symmetry to do just the job once. If your mesh is penetrating, you can just click to add collision. So what we want to do here is just kind of groom this nicely to fit in. Don't worry, it'll be fast. We will not have to kind of set up the node manually. We'll be using the presets so you can see how it works. Okay, so once you do that for the top hair, I'm turning off the X symmetry, and we can actually use project sphere, which is basically 3D brush, and adjust this. We basically want some of the hair, the side hairs to lie down, while the top one should be standing. If you're noticing your object is penetrating the mesh, one thing you can check is, for example, we have this. So you say, hey, my mesh looks good. You want to actually pull this out so it doesn't go into the mesh. It's going to look good. You have that penetrating the mesh. Okay, so once you're happy, the next step is to grab the snake hook brush and just pull out certain hairs. It doesn't matter kind of your thought process on this, just as long as you kind of get some spikiness going for it, just some hair longer. Obviously, it depends on where you want the dreads to kind of grow from. If you want it to grow more from here, then you want to kind of have that spikiness there. So this looks okay. Then we can just use the comb brush and fix anything, just making sure it looks neat, even though right now it looks a bit rough. Okay, so I'm happy with this, and if you my one rule in working with hair, getting the guide hairs to look perfect is your #1 priority. You want to always forget all the cool modifiers like coiliness you want to add to that hair. It's important you get the guide hair working first. So that's why this will usually be the longest part of the entire process. So we can actually test how it is coming out through like a nice preview render. So this is looking good. I probably don't want this line here, so I will move the hair to hide it. So you want to make sure you get this particular process clean. I've showed a different approach where you can use curves to achieve the same thing. But this could also work. Okay, so this looks good. Now let's add the children hair to fill in the gaps. So if you enable children, it's set to simple. Let's switch it to interpolated. So for the interpolated, we can use the mask we use when generating the hair, and we want to enable view guide curves. So we are rendering the guide curves too alongside the children hair. It will at least give us some starting ground, so we don't have to use so much children as we would have if we didn't have a guide curve visible. Like if I disable this, I mean, it makes not a lot of difference. Anyway, it's nice is there, you know. Okay, so for the afro hair, to use what make it work, we could actually test render this first to see how it looks. It's still looking clean. For the afro hair, we could go in and try to manually kind of add the modifiers, but like I said, I provided new presets, so we can do afro preset 2. And once we add it, you can see how it's looking. So let's go through all the modifiers we added. So the first one we added is the coily hair modifier. You can go in and control the intensity of the coiliness. So if you increase the coiliness like 8, it becomes more coily. So 2, 3 is probably good for this. Okay. So we then add some noise. You can reduce the noise to factor of 1. So if you want it to be more blown up, looking more rough, then you can do that. And then the clump, which I talked about, is for the chunkiness. So basically, if we increase this distance value to 0.08, it's going to have more clumpiness. So like I said, depending on what you want, if you want a more rougher looking hair, using clump will help you achieve that easily. Okay, so let's play with how this actually looks overall. For the hair radius, I'm going to set this to 0 so it tapers out. And for the base radius, 0.001, 0.03. Okay. Okay, so let's create a fade and start cleaning up the hair. So for that, we're going to add a trim node, a trim modifier. By the way, like I said, this is basically geometry nodes. We're adding different modifiers. It just makes it easier for you to manage as an artist, especially when dealing with masks and setting it up. It becomes quite tedious when you have to go into your node editor all the time. Okay, for the trim, we just need to enable image mask. Click on new. We can call this fade mask because I have a previous fade texture. Leave it at white. Hit OK. So nothing happens. That's because we need to create the mask. So in texture paint mode, it's already set up for us. We want to set it to black. I previously told you guys you can use this to really get nice fall off, but you could basically use anyone because of a new technique I will show you now. So we'll turn off the occlude and coil so we can paint through it. And now we want to get the area we want. So we want to fade out this particular regions. And I will turn on the occlude again, and I want to fade out this part too. And probably some of this. I will go ahead and save this into the blend file. And let's go back to object mode. So for the intensity, we can set it to 0. And we can see the transition. It's very abrupt and crisp. It doesn't really transition well. To fix that, you can, let's go into the texture paint mode. That's the image editor. So we get the fade mask and actually save this out. So we'll save it to somewhere like my desktop as a PNG file. And then I'm going to open this up in Photoshop. So edit external. I'll click on that and it's going to send it to Photoshop. And the way why it works is because in the file and path, if you come to applications, you can set up a particular image editor you want whenever you click on the edit external. So I set mine to Photoshop, and that's how it works. So for the blur, we'll just blur it out a lot, depending on how much transition you want to get. It's going to probably lose some of the crispiness, but we can always fix that. So once we save out that image in Photoshop, we can come here and say reload texture. And once it reloads, you can see now we've created nice smooth transitions throughout the hair. One thing you'll notice is like it blurred out some lines here, like in this patch. So to fix that, we can go back into the mask texture paint mode, leave this at black, and we want to get this fall off, and then we want to kind of paint this out manually, the place we blurred out, so we can manually kind of transition it nicely. And that's how you kind of do that. So I'll go ahead and save the image in Blender, and yeah, there we go. So this is your trimmed hair. So this is it without. This is it with. Okay, so for the next step, if you want to kind of make this look even more clean, we can add another trim modifier above the coils. So we want to control the length before we start applying any effect. So it's going to kind of reduce the length of the hair to even get it looking more clean. But obviously we'll get the spike since it was kind of part of the guide curves. So this will allow us to always control anything. So we can always name this like hair length. You can give it your custom name, coily. So you can always customize the name. So just keep things simple, especially if you're working with teams. Now we can test render it, but before we test render it, let's switch the color to something different. By the way, this only works with the principal color. So for example, if I select this and change the color to like a different shader, like principal shader, or use texture, it stops affecting the surface, so you don't have to worry about that. But it will still affect the viewport display to give you some like little control. So let's go ahead and render this. So this is our result so far. We can set the color a bit darker. And one thing I noticed with the new Blender is, at least it's a feature, not a problem. You can change this to Hung. I think it's a different hair algorithm for the shader. It gives you more control, like you can reduce the reflectivity or the transmission so light doesn't pass through it. I used to use the combination of this hair shader and principal BSDF, but using this one will basically render that irrelevant. So this will probably be my go-to now. You can also control the roughness. I'm going to give it more roughness and make it more shiny. Okay, so for the dreadlocks, we can add a new dread hair, but before we do that, let's optimize slightly because things can get slow quickly if you don't optimize. So optimize that, and we can even turn off everything except the trim. So let's create a new hair. This will be our dreadlocks. So for the dread, for that we will go. We could generate hair, but why just waste an image texture when you can just drop it in and offer is quicker preview. Let's use 0.2 to have it looking long enough. So let's say maybe 0.2 and we'll go for a different haircut this time, a different like hair packing this time. So I'm gonna turn on symmetry. So I'm just placing the hair curves on it like this. So I want to pack this all back. So depending on the density, this is where you kind of determine that. If you want more or less, you can always set it up here. So we'll use projected to get all of this and pack them backwards like this. Okay, and just make it flow out. And we can even add like a ribbon using a simple maybe curve. Circle curve with some radius or some depth out here. Okay, and to be a nice guide for us to make sure everything sits inside of it. And then it flows out. Then we can add some extra curves here just to, and for this I think I will use turn off asymmetry so that we can have it looking more asymmetrical, kind of break things up here. So you can, if you have everything selected and you just want to select one, you can select that, come to curve, select link. So it's gonna only select that link to allow us to come here and style it even more. Okay, so I'm done adding like the breakup hairs, and we are good to go from here. We can play with the hair radius instead. It's 0.05. Shrink it down a bit. You can always switch to strand if you want to see the default way Blender renders hair on the viewport. Okay, so this is looking good. For an extra tip, if you're trying to get to break up the perfection even slightly, you can use displacement and apply it, and it applies to the curve. So you kind of set up how you want the guide curve to look, but this is just if that's what you're looking to achieve. Okay, so for the next step is to create the radius for the hair. So we'll use simple duplication. We'll set the radius to 0.003. If you want it to look more dense and thick, you can use multi-grain hair. So let's say 50 is good for now. You might increase it as needed. You want to also click on even thickness and the round tip. You want to have that enabled. So we can also tweak this slightly. It really sits inside even with the newly enabled children hair. Okay, so once we have this, we can actually tell it to copy the same hair color as the main hair so that they feel natural. And you can now control those colors from here. select this, we have a preset, so you can choose to use the clean dreadlocks, and there you go. So let's go over the settings. Like I said, it's pretty straightforward. The settings for the clean dreadlocks are, it uses coily with like a resolution of 300, so you can copy my preset here. And for the hair noise, this is what I have going for it. And then the fray hair, which basically creates basically flyaway hair. I was recently told by my girlfriend that yeah, there's nothing like fray hair, it's flyaway hair, so I'll be changing that soon. Yeah, so we have it looking good, and we can actually go ahead and render this. So this is what we get right off the back. Couple of things we want to take notes: the radius of the hair, we need to change that. So set this radius to 0.0003. Just make it smaller. Tapering it, it's kind of optional. The less you taper, the more hair you will kind of salvage in the length. So if you want to kind of see more of this length, you can increase this to like 8. So we can see more of it. Unlike the simple strand hair where you want to tape at the end, with this you want to kind of still maintain the volume. If you feel it's still looking clean, like, and you want to break it up some more, then you can set it back to the number. We can set it to like something higher, and it's going to break that up even more. And like I mentioned, if you want more density, you basically increase the children count. Okay, so this is not looking bad. We can try another preset, so let's remove all modifiers, and we'll add the rough preset for the dreadlocks. It has more modifiers going for it, and it's more processing intensive, so it's doing more there. It's adding freeze. We can go through the setting. It kind of messes up the hair when you add it, and then we add the coiliness, and then we add more noise, and then we clump the hair. So the clump is what we use to kind of create the individual dreads, unlike the previous one where we used the guide curves to create the children hair, which is what makes it cleaner. This creates a more unpredictable hairstyle. So if you have like higher distance, so if we have like 0.06, you will have fewer dreadlocks basically, but more messy hair. And if you have lower guide distance, you will have more dreadlocks. So if we render this, it's definitely more messy. So this is the rendered result. As you can see, it's way messy. So let's use a cleaner dreadlock, since that was our end goal. So like I said, it's using the guide curves this time. So that will be it for this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it and it was quite informative. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you wish to see more from me, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and support this channel by purchasing this tool. That will definitely be a tool in your tool set that you will always fall back to when you're creating hair inside Blender using Geometry Node. So that'll be it. I hope you enjoyed it. Bye bye for now. See you next time.